The Timeshift.
And so we say goodbye to Jodie Whittaker and Chris Chibnall. The end of an era, or the end of an era, depending on your point of view. What did you think about this week's episode of Doctor Who? Leave me a comment down below and I'll get back to you shortly. Whilst you're there, be sure to like, favourite, subscribe, click the bell and do all the YouTube stuff that YouTube wants you to do, because YouTube is an increasingly scary place for small content creators. Support your local small content creator today and it will do them a power of good. Now on to the review. Welcome to the end of days! Look, I really don't know how to start this review. I kind of had a bit of a speech ready, but it just doesn't feel appropriate here and now, so we might just drive straight into it and say that... let's just eliminate any kind of pretense and say that I bloody loved that episode. I mean, it wasn't perfect, but wow. Just wow. So let's just get into the headline positives here and now before get into deeper stuff later on. I am happy that this episode wasn't the clusterfuck that I was worried it was going to be. Yeah, I know that seems like damning with faint praise, but when I saw the previews for this episode, with all the different elements in it, the Master, the Daleks, the Cybermen, all these returning companions, I just was thinking to myself, this is going to be an absolute mess. It's going to feel overstuffed, it's going to feel overworked, but in the end, a lot of the elements worked. It was a lot of fun all the way out, and well, there are a few elements that feel drastically underdeveloped, but we'll talk about that shortly. But I'm shocked at how well just about everything hung together. It's almost baffling in a way. The cameo appearances that we got throughout the episode were great to see. I mean, wow. More on that in a moment. The bit towards the end of the episode with Yaz and the Doctor together was brilliant. I know that some people might find it a little bit corny, but I found it sweet. It was a perfect way to round off their relationship together. And you know what? That episode, I hate to say it again, but it was fun. It had a sense of fun and adventure and just madcap, eccentric excitement that we haven't really seen in this era of Doctor Who for quite some time. I don't want to say not since the Stephen Moffat era, because I don't want to sound as though I hated the entire Chibnall era, but it had a sense of adventure to it that I think that the Chibnall era has lacked more often than not. With that in mind, let us pivot into the negatives. I feel that this episode, despite the fact it was able to contain a great deal and deal it quite well, I do feel that the episode probably should have been a two-parter. There's just so many things happening, with some plot elements just fizzling out into nothing, that certain aspects of the story just feel like an excuse to get characters from point A to point B and for them to do their iconic thing more than it is to make something that actually feels coherent. It wasn't incoherent, just that certain sequences just kind of felt more like fan service than they really did feel like a necessary element of the plot. Some of the special effects work just wasn't finished. That moment when Tegan is talking to the Fifth Doctor, there's just moments where the hologram effect just isn't working, and you just got Peter Davison standing there with a blue gel on him over him. I'm sure that it'll be ironed out in the Blu-ray release, but here and now, wow, that just really stuck out to me in a way that it really probably shouldn't have done. And as for that bit at the end, the regeneration, look, I'm gonna get a lot of grief for saying what I've got to say about that, but we'll have to talk about that in depth later. But for here and now, I'll just say this. I fear that it has killed off the dramatic impact of this episode almost permanently. But we'll get onto that shortly. But yeah, as a whole entity, I think that this episode was just fantastic. There really is no other word from it. I'm recording this episode almost as soon as I finish watching it. It is still raw with me, so forgive me if it doesn't quite feel as focused as some of my other reviews, because I'll be honest with you, I just want to get this out of the way because I've got a very busy week on, and I feel that it's just best to get my immediate impressions on this, because I just feel that I just love this episode, and I really wish that the entire Chibnall era was as good as this. I'll be honest with you, I think that Chibnall's opening episode, the Sontaran episodes he's done, and this were all bloody fantastic, and I hope that it will be looked back upon in future years as being classics of Doctor Who. I worry that won't be the case, but still, I love them, and again, it's a shame that the rest of the run wasn't this good. I feel that this episode, again, probably should have been a two-parter, because it felt a little bit overstuffed, and I feel this episode would have a lot more impact had it come at the end of another 9 or 10 episodes. It in isolation just kind of feels like he doesn't quite have the same emotional stakes as how we could come to this at the end of a 12-episode run. But that's kind of a bit more of a problem for me, I suppose, as being someone who doesn't binge-watch programs before I watch the next season of them. It was great, like I said earlier, to see the old Doctors and the old companions back again. I know that Tegan and Ace had been revealed in the preview stuff from the previous episode, so I really wasn't expecting seeing David Bradley and Colin Baker and Sylvester McCoy and Paul McGann back again. I wish there would have been maybe a couple of the modern Doctors make an appearance again. I can only assume that they were busy, or maybe they just don't want to come back for this. But it was great to see them, and they were Doctors of my era. I am a Wilderness Years fan of Doctor Who, so seeing Sylvester McCoy and Ace together again, that little moment, I won't lie, it kind of got me a little bit choked up when the two of them are talking, because they were kind of my Doctor and companion for the greatest time before Doctor Who came back, so having them back on screen together again was just a moment I've been longing for such a great time. I wish it had been like a proper thing with them actually meeting each other again rather than it being a hologram, but hell, it was a great bit. And I'm just really flabbergasted. They got Ian back! Ian! Ian from the original series, Ian from the first Doctor, they got him back! I know that he's still alive, I was just sat there while we're seeing all these old companions like, oh, please say they've got Ian back, please say they've got Ian back, and there he is! Ian Chesterton, back again! I loved it. I really did love this episode, and all these appearances, all these returning characters, for the most part, just felt really earned. Vinder's appearance kind of felt a little bit tacked on, and he did about as much in this episode as he did in his entirety of his previous appearances, but hey-ho, he's kind of part of the family, so we might as well bring him into this, and this might be another thing that gets me a lot of grief, but I think that this episode just knocks Twice Upon a Time on its arse, because this knocks it out the park. Twice Upon a Time just kind of felt, in retrospect, just kind of like a slow march. I don't even know if to call it a slow march is right. It didn't have the same kind of an impact for me. Because when you have Jenna Coleman doing her cameo appearance for that, literally using a green screen on the set of a different program that she was recording at the time, it doesn't quite have the same impact as seeing Ace and Tegan and Graham and Dan and Yaz all together. It doesn't have that same kind of impact for me. But that's a discussion for another time. As I said in my negatives, I do feel that there was a lot happening in the core story. Arguably, possibly too much. I mean, this wasn't quite Stephen Moffat levels of convoluted brain spaghetti mess, but it feels as though, again, this probably should have been a two-parter, because there's just some plot elements that were just dumped to one side. Maybe some of these ideas were intended to be full episodes, but due to the disease that shall not be named, and seemingly the BBC deciding to do this as specials rather than a full season, it just wasn't built out. Like the moment we had the Dalek having this identity crisis, that was brilliant. That could have been a whole episode. That could have been a two-parter, for goodness sake, but here it just felt like a plot contrivance so that the Doctor would get kidnapped and then taken to the Master. An idea that good being used for something so utterly mundane in the grand scheme of things just feels like a betrayal of the concept in a way. Again, I wish that some more had been done with it, but a lot of things in this episode feel like more should have been done with them. The Master being Rasputin should have been something. You know what, I'm just going to list off things, and I don't want to just descend into a rant about listings, but, you know, there's more that should have been done here with some of these ideas, but again, it all executed itself in a very competent way. I understand that for some people, yeah, it still feels like a clusterfuck, but for me and now, and honestly, it might be the aftermath of me having watched the ending of Ozark, and that kind of feeling like a wet fart of an ending, and maybe in comparison I'm being overly sympathetic to this, but this really was rather fantastic. I did think that the child that we saw was going to be the timeless child, and there's a part of me that wonders if Chibnall set that up as a bait and switch, because I was certain all the way up through the previous specials that the last episode was going to be the thing that was going to wrap up the timeless child stuff once and for all. and it didn't. And I know that some people hate it. I personally hate the Timeless Child stuff. But the way that it was left off the previous season felt like there was just like one chapter, one little element that needed to land in order to wrap this all up. Because otherwise it just ends up becoming a case of, it doesn't matter. And maybe each would have done, had Chibnall had another season, maybe had things gone differently, it would have done, but you know what, I'm not going to let it dwell on the Timeless Child stuff because I know it pisses a lot of people off, but whatever, we'll move on. I think the scene with Dan leaving was fantastic, but again, I feel that should have come at the end of an episode rather than it just being done here and now, seemingly just to cut the numbers down in terms of who was in the episode. So it means that John Bishop's time as a companion on the show really feels like a missed opportunity, because when he's been good, he's been fantastic. But we haven't seen much of him, and that was been a recurring problem with Yaz as well. Yaz was great in this episode. Again, there's an argument that said they probably should have done more, particularly one moment in particular, but we'll get onto that in just a second. But Mandip Gill did fine, bearing in mind she probably didn't have as much to do as she really should have done. Especially bearing in mind the stuff to do with the Doctor and Yaz's relationship. Yeah, I know there's a lot of people that don't like the idea of the Doctor and the companion having romantic feelings for one another. And I know that for some people, the whole Yaz-Doctor relationship thing just seems to come out of left field. I personally don't think it has. I think more has been done to set it up than a lot of people give it credit for. However, I feel that this episode should have had them just rounding their relationship off. Maybe not with a kiss. Maybe it should have had a kiss. But in the end, Yaz never really tells the Doctor how she feels about her. And whilst I do love that final scene, and I think that is one of the best emotional moments that there's been in the entire run of the Chris Chibnall era, it perfectly summarises the best elements of the Chris Chibnall era. I still think that there just needed to be that one extra element to help it land. And maybe it is a aftermath thing of the disease that shall not be named because YouTube doesn't want me to. Maybe they were going to kiss, but then some suit on the side of set said, "Oh, you can't do that. It cross-contamination there. You've got to be a foot apart from each other. Are you in each other's safety bubble?" Maybe it had been planned, but in the end they didn't. So they just had to sit there and have ice creams together. Which, said out loud, sounds like the most insane thing in the world, but it works for modern Doctor Who. That's what modern Doctor Who is. It's kind of a bit corny and a bit silly, but it can be really emotionally heavy at times. I will admit that more of the emotionally heavy bits for me came from seeing the Doctors that I grew up with again, and actually being in the modern run of Doctor Who. One of the biggest issues I've had about modern Doctor Who is it just doesn't want to use its existing actors, its legacy characters, its legacy actors. I understand not bringing back certain characters because they might be wrapped up in copyright drama, but you've got Sylvester McCoy and Colin Baker and Paul McGann. Just bring them on for an episode or two. Have them be a multi-Doctor special, which is ultimately what this one ended up becoming in the end. I wish they'd have done more, and yeah, I wish that they actually had been them rather than a hologram, but still, it was great to see them. I understand that there's going to be a lot of people that are going to raise the point of, well, the master Cybermen are still out there, shouldn't that be a problem? But it really doesn't matter. I do wish that they had got a better ending as well, to be honest with you. When we learned that this big planet thing could convert one thing into another, I was expecting the Doctor to convert them back into Time Lords, and that their big final act will be saving the Time Lord race, but no, they've just been killed off again, so I don't know, maybe somewhere in the Russell T Davies series we'll see the Time Lords again, maybe it'll come with the next showrunner, I really don't know, but Time Lords are dead again, and there's a whole race of Time Lords Cybermen out there that haven't really been dealt with, that are just lying on the floor. Skiddly-dee. Another element that I did enjoy with this episode was the performance of, and I forget the name now, but the Master in this episode. I will be honest, I didn't like the fact that he felt more like a modern incarnation of the Master rather than the classic one that I prefer, but they really worked well to just act the hell out of everything that they were in, with a level of range that is just staggering. I'd hate to say it, but I think that Jodie Whittaker in some places probably could have learned a thing or two, but yeah, they just knocked it out the park, and there's certain moments where it feels like they're carrying the entire weight of the episode on their back. Speaking about the entire episode, I think it's time for us to talk about the ending. And I worry that this is the moment where any goodwill that I've built up with you, dear listener, might be killed off here and now, because we got to talk about the ending, and we're going to talk about the return of David Tennant. I'm not going to go into a rant about this, because I've already re-recorded this particular segment like 5 times now, and it almost always descends into a rant, so I'm going to be professional about this. And I'll just say, firstly, if you're happy to see the return of David Tennant, I'm happy for you. And I'm not just saying that to be diplomatic, I genuinely am, because looking online, looking on Twitter and seeing all the excited comments about Doctor Who and what's coming up next, it genuinely is doing me a power of good. For the past 4 or 5 years, it feels like I've just been going insane for even daring to watch Doctor Who. Doctor Who had just felt like this taboo thing that nobody likes, but now seeing people just genuinely enthusiastic about it, going, oh my god, I can't believe this, all that noise, it really just, it fills my heart with joy, and seeing people excited again, just, I love it. But with that said, firstly, I dislike the fact of how it was executed, because it kind of feels like it's undercutting the drama of everything that came before it. It feels like it's stealing the limelight of Jodie Whittaker and Chris Chibnall. And I know there's a lot of people out there that don't like either of them, but this was their swan song. This was their final moment. This is their time to say goodbye. And we're undercutting it by bringing back one of the most favourite Doctors that there has ever been. And I worry that more people are going to talk about that than they are about the episode itself. And that the legacy of this episode won't be the fact that it was this episode that was X and Y and Z. And more, oh my god, this is the episode where David Tennant came back. Ooh! Which for me, who's someone who I'll just say is David Tennant agnostic, it kind of feels like it's doing a disservice to, again, Chris Chibnall and Jodie Whittaker. Beyond this point, I will be honest with you, and I've said this in the past, that the return of David Tennant has felt like a bit of a red line for me. It feels like the point of no return, and were we ever to do this, I'd have to seriously think about whether or not I was going to ever watch Doctor Who again. And I will be honest with you, I'm not going to throw my toys at the pram and say, I'm not watching Doctor Who is dead, because I don't think that's the best tact to take. But I will say this, I am deeply sceptical about all of this. I know that Russell T Davies is a stupidly talented writer, and he is, let's all be honest, the guy responsible for bringing back Doctor Who, and he will always have, I don't even know the best word for it, he'll always have my respect for doing it and for bringing it back in such a fantastic way. But there's a part of me that worries that this is biting off a bit too much for him, and there's also the simple fact that this isn't the return of the 10th Doctor, this is the 14th Doctor. It has been confirmed that David Tennant is playing the 14th Doctor, and the guy that we thought was going to be playing the 14th Doctor is actually playing the 15th Doctor. So, yeah, we've crossed the Rubicon, we can bring anyone back now, so yeah, Tom Baker, your time has come, time to wheel you out of the retirement home, good lord. And there's also the simple fact of that, no, I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to say it because that feels like a horrible thing to say. But I will say this. I do have a lot of respect for Russell T Davies and David Tennant. But there is a part of me that feels that this is too much in the way of fan service. Which is ironic given everything that happened in the 90 minutes before that. But it feels like almost everything after the moment that Russell T Davies left, it feels like going back this hard to what came before that it feels like it's being disrespectful to Stephen Moffat and to Matt Smith and to Peter Capaldi and to Jodie Whittaker and to Chris Chibnall. It's going to send a message out to a lot of people that, oh, don't worry about all those seasons, now's the point where Doctor Who really comes back. Which might sound a bit conspiratorial, but I know for a fact there's a lot of people that gave up watching Doctor Who when David Tennant left it. And I've always said, I'll only watch it when he comes back. So, we'll see. We'll see how it all pans out. I am curious to see how Russell T Davies is going to square all this. It's going to be for a mini-series. 3 episodes. That's all it's going to be. That's all we're getting next year. The 60th anniversary of Doctor Who. And all we're getting is 3 episodes. We're not getting a Christmas special this year. And I'm fairly certain that we're not getting a New Year's special either, so yeah, fantastic. I'm really going to be doing no more episodes of the Timeshift between now and next year. Well, actually said that I probably will do a couple extra videos as we go along. But anyway, what did you think about this week's episode of Doctor Who? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Let me know in the comment section down below. And I'll get back to you shortly. Watch you there. Be sure to like, favourite, subscribe, click the bell, and do all the G stuff that YouTube wants you to do. Thank you all for watching, and goodbye. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, favourite, subscribe, click the bell, and do all the YouTubey stuff that YouTube wants you to do. Go on, it'll do me a power of good. Until next time, my friends, goodbye!